Hello friends, welcome back. I'm Nick, and this is MSFS Flight Plans, where we are on a mission to save the world through simming one unbelievably cool flight at a time. But I have to confess, I nearly ruined the world with one of our recent flights. That's right, some high drama unfolded, which I'll tell you all about once we get past our first few landmarks today, so be sure to stay tuned for that. So here we are, up in Scotland, an amazing country no matter what part of it you decide to explore, but today we're in Edinburgh, the capital city, and a place I'd been wanting to visit anyway since it was part of the recent UK World Update, but there are castles and history and forts and all kinds of amazing things up here, and we're going to see all of it. And as you can see, my Sting S4 is almost working perfectly again. The last time we took this out was a long time ago in our Pittsburgh flight, but the brakes stopped working on that one, and they weren't working again until I hopped back in and tried flying it, so they're working for now. Along with everything else except some functions on the autopilot, but it works well enough to fly, so we're going to go ahead and try to do it while I still can. Let's go ahead and get her started up, and then I'll show you you know what, I'm going to show you since I have to step on the brakes once we start it. Let's look at the Google map just real quick. This is going to be a pretty long flight because there is tons and tons of stuff to see out here. So here's UK, here's Scotland up here, and we're going to be leaving from over here. So the photogrammetry for the city, I drew out a flight all the way around it. It kind of goes just to the west of these bridges down here. It comes along this road running around town, and then there's like a little section that comes out here. But we're starting way over here because there's a few things that I want to show you, and I'll tell you why we're out here in a non-photogrammetry section. You can probably imagine what one of those things is going to be. We're going to leave from Durleton, maybe just south of North Brunswick a little bit. There's a tiny little private airport. We're going to come up here, circle around this way, come along the coast, check out a couple of castles up there, come back down this way, over here, and then do a pass along the coastline of Edinburgh, and then come all the way up here, check out these bridges they got, which look incredible. Come down here, cross over the airport that we're going to land at, and then come down around here on the southern side of town, and then do a tighter circle inside to see Edinburgh Castle and all that stuff, and then we're going to come on here and land. So I'm guessing this flight's probably going to be one of our longer ones, maybe 45 minutes, maybe even an hour, but it is going to be jam-packed with all kinds of amazing stuff to do and see. Okay, so let's go ahead and get her started up here real quick. All right, looks like that's good to go. Turn our pump on real quick, step on the brakes because there's no parking brake in this thing. Turn that pump off because it's very loud and very whiny. And that's about all we got to do. Landing lights on. That's good. And I think everything else is in pretty good order here. And do we have our transponder set for... Yep, it's already on altitude. Man, we're ready to go. Okay. All right, well, let's go ahead and do this. I do have two add-ons installed for this trip. One of them is this airport, which was freeware. That will be included in the video description, as always, along with a link to this exact flight plan. If you want to fly it just as we are, you can bring it in a little NavMap. I'll mention that again in just a minute. The other add-on is the Northern UK pack from ORBX, which throws in tons and tons of landmarks around Edinburgh. This might be the most dense population of landmarks they put anywhere in the Northern UK. And the only reason I did that is because in this part of the area, the photogrammetry, well, there's no photogrammetry. The map looks pretty bad, but there's some spots up here I wanted to see if we could see, and that pack added them. It will overwrite some of the photogrammetry stuff when we get downtown, but it's not terribly noticeable. And because we're in Europe, the photogrammetry is not just phenomenal anyway, so I don't think it's going to be too bad. All right, full prop. And, whoa, it already gave me... Okay, one notch of flaps. All right, we're ready. You guys ready? Let's do it. So once we get up, we'll throw it on autopilot, and we'll be moving. This is the live weather. We've got, it says no wind now, but I just landed from another test flight, and there was about a 14-knot wind once we got it over the water. And up we go. Okay, so flaps up. Our cruise altitude for this one is going to be 1,500 feet, which will be just about right. And let's go ahead and get the autopilot on. And we'll set our vertical speed at 500. Now, one of the problems I'm having with the autopilot is I can't get it to... If I stop at an altitude selection, I can't change it from there. So I'm just going to adjust with the vertical speed. And that's how we'll roll for this one. All right, let's get the automatic prop control on. One less thing I have to worry about. And we're going. Looking good. Let's check that barrel one more time now that we're in the air. So this place we're at now, or the place we left from, is called Archerfield Airstrip, and the only thing I really know about it is that it's private, and just to the east of the runway there's a big old mansion called the Archerfield House. We won't really be able to see that one, unfortunately, but that was built by some feudal land barons called the Nisbet family. And for a while in the late 1800s, renowned author Robert Louis Stevenson was living in the place, even writing a short story about it called The Pavilion on the Links, which is a very appropriate title considering there are at least 8 golf courses that I could count within 5 miles of that airport. So lots of golf courses. So if you want to fly in to hit the links in a beautiful setting, this might be a great place to do it. You probably even bring the golf cart right to your plane down here. Our first landmark, which is going to be right down here, tucked, it's brown and it kind of blends into the trees, but that's it right over there. is called Durlton Castle, which is not the same place affiliated with the airport, I should add, despite being right down the street from it. And they started building that place in the mid-1200s, and it was abandoned for the last time before the start of the 17th century. And unlike many of the other castles that have fallen down just fine on their own, that one took some serious damage during the wars of Scottish independence and the English Civil Wars, and was the location of some plots against a couple of royals, and even was besieged by Cromwell's forces during the Third English Civil War in 1650. Most of these saw a lot of action out here. This was a busy place as far as combat goes. Just watching that altitude because I do want to try to stop at 1500. This town down here along the coast is called North Berwick, which is an Old English word, Berwick is, which means North Barley Farm. And they found evidence of people living down there for at least 2,000 years. And I was also reminded why it is important to look at the history of every one of these little towns, because I learned something new about the history of all of Scotland when I did that. When they were digging up some water mains in the early 2000s, they found the remains of some old city walls, which I thought was strange for a little place like this way out here. But then I discovered that an Act of Parliament in 1503 required all towns along the east coast of Scotland to build walls. And that's why they built the one down there. But they didn't mention anything about why they issued that order. That hill right there is called Berwick Law. And that thing is an ancient volcanic plug. And you won't be surprised that they found all kinds of old ruins on top of that beauty as well. And I was also unaware of the volcanic history of this region, which it turns out is rather substantial, as you'll soon discover. Alright, so we're right at 1500 now. That's good. Let's just hang out right there, and I'm going to go ahead and do an altitude hold because we should be good for the rest of the trip. So we'll just see how that goes. Once you get up here, not too bad for the fields. I don't know if you saw that rock out there, which we're going to go take a look at. That was kind of popping in a little bit, and this castle is going to pop too that we're about to look at, like really pop. We'll be on top of it before it pops in. So everything we see out here that looks like it's not defaultish is because of the ORBX pack. So once this thing pops into view, we will see the ruins of Tantalon Castle perched right along the coast. And I think it's going to pop in right here. And that was built in the 1300s and there it is. The last of the curtain wall castles to be constructed in Scotland. And it also saw loads of action over the centuries and was heavily damaged in each dust-up. And that baby is fairly hefty in all its dimensions. The curtain wall's 50 feet high in some spots. The gatehouse is 80 feet high, and the central tower was 7 stories high, or is 7 stories high. We're going a little fast, so we'll slow it down some. This big rock out here is called the Bass, also a volcanic plug, and on this side of it we'll see some more castle ruins. You can just barely see them right down there. And I couldn't pin down a precise date of construction for that one, but it appears to have been built by the Lauder family sometime around the start of the 14th century. And it was used for a prison for political enemies in the 1500s and gained some notoriety for religious prisoners in the late 1600s, giving it the label the Patmos of Scotland. That might not be the right elevation for that. They said it was built on the only spot that was accessible from the water, and that doesn't seem very accessible, so I'm guessing that's probably a little bit closer down to the water. And the last substantial building project occurred in 1902 when they built that little lighthouse on the corner of it, Bass Rock Lighthouse. Okay, so let me tell you about how I almost ruined simming for everyone, just like I seem to ruin Christmas each year for everyone in my family. Many of you probably got to check out our recent flight over the cliffs of Moore in the R-22, which was amazing. And if you haven't yet, you'll no longer find it on our YouTube page because I pulled it down. If you've seen even a handful or more of our flights, you know that I go out of my way to stay away from sensitive subjects, and that is intentional. It seems like it's almost impossible to find anything on the internet these days that isn't created intentionally to irritate our senses in one way or another, and I want this channel to be a retreat from all that. So with the exception of Chet and his wife, who both kind of deserve it, I never denigrate or disparage any country, any race of people, any part of the world. I have nothing but admiration for all of humanity, and even that's gotten me in trouble on some of our flights, like that Russia flight. And I really believe that kind of approach to all this will take us at least one small step towards bringing all of humanity together. But if you're paying close attention to the first minute or so of that last flight, I said something like, I've really been wanting to come up here to get to the UK to check out the recent world update. That may have been exactly what I said. The problem with that statement was I was sitting on a runway in Ireland. And I'm of Irish descent, and I know Ireland is not part of the UK, and I wasn't trying to imply that it was. I was saying it in the context of while I was down in Spain, which was our flight before that, and I said that right before I said the other thing. I wanted to come up here, like up here to the north of Spain, to see the UK cities. Then I wanted to say that I wasn't terribly impressed, so I decided to fly out here to Ireland. So I never explicitly said that I thought Ireland was part of the UK, and I wasn't even trying to imply that, but it was just a bad and entirely unintentional choice of words, so somebody called me out on it in the comments and seemed somewhat upset by it. And I know that may not seem like a big deal to people outside of Ireland, but it's a pretty big deal to them. And whether I'm in it like that or not, I have no interest in creating undue drama on our channel, so I pulled that video down. However, now that you know what I meant by it, and I think you will totally get that that's what I meant if you go and hear me say that after that explanation, I don't want to rob you guys of a really cool flight, but I also don't want to risk tarnishing our channel by leaving it up in the public domain. So if you want to see it, I can get it to you in one of two ways. If you join our Discord server, which I'll encourage you to do regardless of whether you care about that flight or not, I'll post an unlisted link in our announcements section in the top left of the page, which will always stay up there. Alternately, if you send me an email to msfsflightplans@gmail.com, I will send you the link directly. So again, sorry for the misunderstanding. I was wringing my hands about it all week. Finally decided it was better to just pull it down after some wise counsel from one of our other members, but I've got it if you want to see it. Just let me know. This little island down here is called Phaedra, and it is appointed with the ruins of an old castle, a chapel, and lighthouse built in 1885, which is still standing and still lit. And I think all you can see is the lighthouse on this one. Man, these things are really popping, aren't they? Well, no, you can see all of it. So there's where the castle would be, and then there's the lighthouse right there. But you can tell, as far as an island, that terrain does not look great. But at least we got to see the one thing that's worth looking at down there. Though we can't really see it from here, right down along the inside of this little bay right here, there's a place called the Durleton Caves. I checked out some of the pictures of that place on a travel blog, and it looked pretty cool. The guy said it was used for a while by smugglers, and there's even some ancient scorch marks on the ceilings from hearths of days gone by, which is awesome. In this area right in here is the village of Gullen. It has a population of around 3,000, and I have to imagine it is a beautiful little place right along the coast like this. And I read it was traditionally a spot for retirees, but more recently has attracted some younger families wanting to live outside of Edinburgh and commute to the city, which apparently isn't an easy task because they don't have any major roads connecting this place yet. And once they do, it'll probably ruin the nice little private setting of the place, because that's what usually happens. This big beach right here is called Gullen Bents, which, much like in Ireland, these guys just have incredible place names for everything. And they said this is an award-winning beach. I don't know what kind of awards it won, but if you look on a map with better resolution, you can see it is very heavily populated with lots of holiday makers hanging out down there on the shore. And then this area over here is called Aberlady Bay. And if you look on any of the satellite maps, this whole thing looks like a huge sandbar. You can't see any of it here, so maybe when the tide goes out, the sand comes up. But in both the Google Map and in little NavMap, which we'll look at the end, that thing is completely sanded over. Look at all these golf courses. They're everywhere. There's another one here. Again, 8 of them within 5 miles of that airport. Lots of golf. We've got a minute or two before our next landmark, so let's get our announcements out of the way. The winner of the quarterly flight plan suggestion competition is our member OBS Lynx for our flight out over Sicily. So congrats, Lynx. You have been such an asset to our community. I thank you so much for that. He has selected a gift card to Sim Market, and I'm once again donating all of my YouTube proceeds for the channel, which is a little over $50 for all of you thinking about making a career of flight sim channels. Not going to happen. But I told him he better let us know what he buys with it, along with a full review. That's what I'm looking forward to hearing about. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm just making the assumption that he is a he. No, he is a he. He did a group flight with us last night, which I'll tell you about in just a minute. You know, some folks, I just assume, based on the statistics of our channel, like 99.9% of the people are males. Not a lot of ladies in flight simming, but we do have one. Hobie Gal, love you. But if you want to get in this quarter's competition, just hop into our Discord server. The link for that, as always, will be in the video description, and click on our Suggest a Flight section. All I need to know is the departure and arrival airports and a few spots to check out in between, and I'll take care of the rest. At the end of the quarter, we'll vote on the best flight as a sim community, and the winner will get to pick their favorite sim vendor, and a gift card will be promptly delivered. And again, if you like this flight and would like to take a crack at it yourself, the exact flight plan will be included in the video description. Just click on the link, save the plan into your downloads folder, and open it up in Little NavMap, and you'll be ready to rock. If you don't know how to use Little NavMap, I've produced a very short tutorial that will get you up and running in a matter of minutes, literally. And that can be found in our how-to playlist on our YouTube channel. And one more thing I want to mention, because I've been talking about it for the past few flights, is the group flight that we took last night. It was our first, formally planned out, orchestrated group flight. One of our members set up a flight down in Mexico. We took off from one Addon airport, landed at another one, which was inside the caldera of a volcano, then landed at another one inside the caldera of another volcano. And we were kind of stressing out about it, how would it go down? We had about 6 people on the flight. It was incredible. So much fun. I mean, the airports were cool that we came into. A massive landing challenge in the second one. And I think my favorite part of it You know, it's kind of fun to do landing challenges in the sim by yourself, but I was the caboose for that particular leg of the flight, and with 6 guys sitting on the apron watching you land at a challenge like that, man, what a rush. You don't want to screw up something like that. We all managed to land it, so that was really, really fun. And we're going to try to do that once a month. I think the next one is going to be orchestrated by another one of our members, and that should be up in Maine around the end of the northern end of the Appalachian Trail, so that'll be pretty cool. We're going to take a seaplane flight for that one. And then one of our other members volunteered to set up a turboprop flight somewhere. I don't recall exactly where that was, but if you want to get in on that, got to join the Discord server. And aside from all those amazing things you can do in there, it is just a fun place to hang out. So I'll encourage you to check that out if you want to have a lot of fun with a lot of guys that are just as geeky about simming and aviation as I am. Yep, see, these fields don't look great. We're about to cross over into the photogrammetry section, and they're going to start to look a lot better. Don't look real good down here. Neither do the default buildings. Obviously very defaultish. But it is what it is. Let's hop outside the plane real quick, see how that looks. I'm trying to do better about getting nice camera views from the outside so it doesn't look like I'm looking off to the side every time we switch, but that looks pretty good. Well, what is that? Some crop circles? Oh, yes. I knew it. Even aliens couldn't resist the siren song of the bagpipes. There they are. They got them. Fantastic. Look at that. That's great. They don't look like true blue crop circles, but close enough for me. Okay, coming up next is Fawside Castle, which might also be pronounced Fawside, or Fawside Castle. And the earliest portions of this place were built in the 1400s, and it was heavily restored in the 1980s, so this one, unlike all the others that we've seen so far, is not in ruins. And the original was torched by the English in 1547, burning everyone alive who was still inside of it. And on the morning of June 15th, 1567, Mary, Queen of Scots, departed the castle heading out to the nearby Battle of Carberry Hill, where after a grueling standoff, which involved a lot of duel-like challenges between the local aristocracy, Mary surrendered. And man, all you history buffs should read the story of that showdown. It was pretty bizarre. And the castle is currently under private ownership, and I think they're using it as a B&B. It's right at the bottom of this windmill up here. That's not it. I thought that was it at first, but it's not. Okay, so here's where the photogrammetry starts. You can kind of see the little tiling effects, but the fields are definitely going to start looking better. So this is going to be it right down there. You'll see it a lot better once we get closer to it. And I just don't know what the deal is with the photogrammetry in the UK. I mean, you can tell it looks much nicer than default stuff, much more believable. But it's a little bit darker, a little bit more jagged, just not quite as precise as it is in a lot of the US cities. Really, it's all of Europe, it seems to have that effect. Not sure if they're using a different type of technology or what. There's the castle right there. Fawside Castle. And now they got their own huge windmill, too. We're going to turn to the northwest here, and we've got another big house just on the other side of the town of Musselburgh. And this one is called New Wales Estate, and it is a bit newer compared to a lot of the others out here. This one was built in 1686 by a Scottish architect named James Smith to be his personal residence. And as you'll see, it sits on a lot of acreage as soon as we make this turn. 80 acres to be precise. But unfortunately for Mr. Smith, he got caught up in a side biz of coal mining, which he probably shouldn't have got involved with, being an architect by trade, which went bust, and he had to sell the place after just 10 years. So then it changed hands a few more times before being acquired by the aristocratic Dalrymple family, who owned it and lived there for another 300 years until the last of the line died off there in 2017. And now it's owned by the National Trust and can be toured if you're in the area and want to check it out. It's going to be right up here on our left. I think it's going to be at the southern end of this collection of fields over here. Let's check out this photogrammetry while we head over there. So everything that looks a little bit lighter and or a little bit darker than it should is probably stuff that ORBX threw in here. And again, there is tons of stuff, even just like random buildings, like building number 6, modern glass building, when you're looking at their map. Here's the place right here. That's it, New Wales Estate, and that's spelled kind of strange, N-E-W-H-A-I-L-E-S. So I'm guessing you pronounce that New Wales. Look at that, though. Looks good. This huge body of water stretching out before us is the Firth of Forth, which is also an astounding name for just about anything. I might even start calling my red-headed dog that, since I'm highly suspicious she may be of Scottish blood. But it's fed by the River Forth down at the other end, along with many others, before dumping out into the North Sea back there behind us. And all the ports and industrial areas that have popped up along its shores over the last 1,000 years, I'm guessing, are probably what put this part of Scotland on the map, because they wrap all around this thing. See how dark the photogrammetry looks? That's characteristic of everything in Europe. If you go to France, you know, Italy didn't look too bad, and we're up there. But most of France, down at Portugal, it looks like that. And if you get closer, it gets jagged a lot sooner than the stuff in the US does too. So just something, they're doing something a little bit different with that. But again, from here it looks fine. Good enough anyway. Alright, these are the 4th ports coming up ahead of us. And other than looking really cool, there's an interesting attraction down there. On the other side of it, which we'll see because we're going to turn right over it, is the retired Royal Yacht Britannia, which was in service from 1954 until 1997. Making her the 83rd of such playthings, since Charles II decided to start showing off his vessel in 1660. One thing that's interesting about this ship is that in the event of a nuclear attack on England, the plan was for the Queen to hop on board and sail off to the other coast to get upwind of any fallout, which sounds great on paper, but is comically impractical and would be impossible to execute unless they had a few days heads up. But man, what a great excuse to spend a few £1,000,000 on a luxury yacht, right? And that thing can also be toured. It's going to be right on the other side of this pier right here. We'll get a very nice look at it. And right next to it on that pier is a place I found called the Wee Museum of Memory, which looks like a variety store of old things. I looked at some pictures on the inside of that. But the reviewers on Google all said it was great and free, so why not check it out? There, we got a little cruise ship down there. I don't think that's a cruise ship terminal. They must be working on that thing. Oh, and a building with something written on it. I didn't notice that before. Let's see what it says. You know I love that. Here's the yacht over here. The Britannia. 4th ports. Fantastic. Oh, it looks like ORBX got their hand on that place too. They want to make sure the Wee Museum of Memory got modeled correctly. And that there too. You see what I'm talking about? Just a little lighter, just a little cleaner than some of the stuff around it. There's the yacht. Looking good. So we're going to come all the way around here, come over these bridges, come over the airport, which is right there, come around this side of town. There's the big castle. We'll check that out. We'll get much closer, and then kind of come up right around this way over here, so we'll get a much, much better look at the big castle. One of many castles out here. None compared to that one, though. It is insanely huge. Alright, this big treed area over here is where the Royal Botanic Gardens are. And all you can really see of this, because it's so heavily treed over, is the greenhouse, which is this thing right here. And they moved the gardens to that location from a spot we'll see later in 1763, when the other spot got flooded and polluted and killed all the plants. There's a greenhouse there, you see it? And then this giant thing right here is called Fettes College, and it was founded in 1870 and has always been a boarding school. It was originally just for underprivileged boys and didn't become co-ed until 1970. Look at that place. Of interesting note is that the actor Sean Connery used to deliver milk to that school back in the 1940s while he was working with a local co-op, earning him the nickname the Edinburgh Milkman, which is awesome and hilarious, before he was James Bond. More golf courses. Oh, I didn't even... What is that thing? Look at that. Look at that huge tower thing down there. Boy, that's strange. I wonder what that is. I'm going to have to go back and check that out. It was always on the other side of the plane, so I didn't see it. Right along the coast up here is Morehouse Mansion, and even though it was built just prior to the start of the Victorian era in 1832, it's definitely got that stylistic look to it. And if you've ever been up to the mansions in Newport, Rhode Island from the ground, this one looks a lot like it. Are we flying over it yet? I think we are, so let's hop outside the plane. That's it right there. Kind of treed in, so hard to see it. But they built that one to replace an older palatial residence that has been down there since at least 1610, but that one slowly collapsed, finally disappearing completely sometime in the 1960s. This little hunk of land here is called Crammond Island, and for some reason it is insanely detailed. I landed my helicopter on it the first time I came out here on that little cement thing right there, and you can even see the graffiti on the side of it and all the little rocks along the shoreline. It's crazy how detailed it is. But this is connected to the land. It's called a tidal island, and when the water goes out, there's a walkway that you can walk right across to get out here. If you want to come out here and see these little pillboxes and stuff down here. They have had lots and lots of military stuff on there, with prehistoric barrels discovered while they were building some of the stuff for World War II. So that would have been pre-Iron Age, probably. And they think the Romans built a fort out there, and there may have even been a medieval castle on it at some point, but they're not quite sure. They know there was a castle, they're not sure if that was the island it was on, though. And during World War II, they just put cannon batteries all over that, along with all the other islands out here. Alright, we got two more little castles out here. We're a little bit too far away to really see them. That one's Delmany House, which was built in 1817. They built that one as a more modern residence for the folks who had been trying to keep it real, and Barnbogle Castle, which is up on that little point there. But they rebuilt that place in 1881, and it was owned by Archibald Primrose, 5th Earl of Rosenberry, who was the Prime Minister in the late 1800s. This thing out in the middle of the water up here is the Hound Point Oil Terminal, the largest offshore terminal in Scotland, and this one feeds into those tanks way over there. I guess I didn't want to put those close to the shoreline or put that too close to the shoreline, so the ships tie up here and pump the oil over there. And the name comes from Hound Point, which is right down here. And that name comes from the legend of the guy that owned one of those castles back there. Way back in the day, he set off to fight in the Crusades, leaving his trusty hunting hound behind. And at the moment that man died in battle, reportedly his dog started howling uncontrollably, eventually succumbing to his own broken heart. And ever since, the ghost of the howling hound will appear at that point when the lord of the manor is about to expire. So if you're living in the house and you see a dog running around down there, probably time to head to the emergency room. This big red thing here is the 4th bridge, but the first of these 3. Get it? And this beauty is a railway span and a lot older than I would have thought, being completed in 1890. And in 2016, it was voted Scotland's greatest man-made wonder, and it looks incredible, as you can see. And this little island right here is called Inchgarvie. Also used to have a castle, which later became a prison. And now it's just covered with old cannon batteries. But they disarmed that one for the last time in World War II, or before World War II, in 1930. These next 2 bridges are the 4th Road Bridge, completed in 1964, which is this middle one here, and the Queens Ferry Crossing Bridge, and that one was just opened in 2011, and both of those also look just incredible. And I gotta tell you guys, every time I see a marina that looks like that, I am just so grateful for Man-Made Designs. I have no affiliation with that guy. You may be wondering if I do, because I mention him almost every flight, but boy, does that add a lot of realism to see boats in there not sunk into the water. Really nice. And you can even see little rocks on that breakwater there. Fantastic. Love it. Alright, in just a moment we're going to see Dundas Castle, and Dundas comes from 2 Gaelic words meaning pretty hill, or maybe South Hill, they're not sure which. And if you check out that Ireland flight, you know some of the old hill forts. The first one we saw was called Dun Eocla, and the other one was Dun Angus on that same little western island that we left from, so I'm guessing Dun is the hill part, because everything out there was Gaelic named. So the first structure at this place was a simple keep that went up in the early 1400s, and the various owners just kept on adding to it for the next few centuries, and in the 1800s everything but the keep was torn down and rebuilt into a good old-fashioned 19th century mansion like the last few. This is it right here. We'll get a nice look at that too as we come around. And by the time the current owner inherited it in 1995, it was in very rough shape, so he restored the whole thing, keep and all, and it's now a 5-star venue that can be rented out for weddings or whatever else you want, assuming you can afford it. But look at that place. That's big. It looks great. Let's hop outside the plane. Look at that, kind of perched up on a hill like that. Just a great little spot. Got their own little fishing pond down there. Wonderful. Okay, so we're going to do a mid-field flyover of our destination airport, which is Edinburgh International up here, the 6th busiest in all the UK. And it was originally called Turnhouse Aerodrome when it opened in 1916, which is really early for an airport. And 2 years later, it was renamed RAF Turnhouse, and you can probably guess why. And then RAF Fighter Command took control for World War II, and it was opened again to commercial traffic in 1947. I'm just looking around for anything I may have missed down here on the ground. It looks interesting. I need to go back and explore. Oh, it looks like just a residential area. And then in 1952, they extended their one runway here to handle de Havilland Vampire FB-5 jets, which I really hope someone will make for the sim someday. You need to check out one of those if you haven't seen it before. It has a tail like a double tail, like a P-38, but a single jet engine on the back of the cockpit, so it looks really cool, and it's probably a lot of fun to fly. There's the oil tanks that thing was coming into, so pumping all the way over there. Well, you think they could have got a little closer to the coast, but why tarnish the coastline? Plus, you might bother the Hound. Okay, it's going to get really busy from here on out, which is why I mentioned the airport now, because we won't have time to talk about it on approach. But one more little spot before we get to downtown. I just spotted this thing on my last test flight. It's a single little structure sticking out of the middle of a field up here called Camo Tower. And it looks like a 13th century turret that lost the rest of its castle. But it was built in the early 1800s as a water tower to supply water pressure to a manor house buried in the woods to the north. So this is going to be it right here. We'll see it better down when it comes down here. That little thing sticking up right there, and the manor house was over here. The house itself was built in 1693, so about 100 years earlier, but it fell victim to numerous arson attacks, so they pulled down what was left of it about 40 years ago. There's the tower. And what's crazy about this is that this thing was a garden feature for the house, so it was originally surrounded by ornate gardens that stretched all the way up to the house, which again was somewhere right down here. I'll show you on the map at the end, at least where it was. There's a marker for it still. But I don't think anything of that is still standing. Look at all that construction junk down there. Very nice. Alright, the Edinburgh Zoo is up next, and like virtually all other zoos in the sim, there are too many trees to see much of it. In fact, all we can really see is the parking lot. It's right behind our glare shield right now, so once we turn, you'll be able to see where it would be. There's a little crane right next to it in a C-shaped building. That'll be your VFR marker for where that thing is. So there is the zoo area right there. There's the C-shaped building, and you can't really see the crane because of where the sun is right now, but it's sticking up right there. And the parking lot for the zoo is right down there, that thing. Maybe from directly overhead you could see a little bit more. They got like a penguin pool and stuff down there. And that giant stadium over there is called Murrayfield. And believe it or not, that's not for soccer, it's for rugby. It officially opened for the first time in 1925 and has obviously been built up a bit since then. It's now the largest in Scotland and 5th largest in the UK with a capacity of a little over 67,000. But it's big, and it looks like there's another little one over there too. Look how big that is. That is huge, footprint-wise. Alright, this next spot is tough to see, but it's definitely cool enough to mention. It's called Craig House and started life as a huge private mansion in 1565 after the original mansion burned down, like everything else seems to do out here. And by the late 1800s, the locals were already making note of its strange architecture. This is it right over here. And there were more than a few allegations that it may be haunted, and that was before it was converted to an insane asylum in 1878. So yeah, it's definitely haunted now. And if you've always wanted to live in a place like that, well, you can, because they have converted it to apartments 10 years ago. Look at this place. It looks really cool. Look at that. That's awesome, isn't it? Look at that. Imagine living somewhere like that. Amazing. Beautiful. Okay, we're flying over a bigger hill, but this smaller one here is called Blackford Hill. And there was an ancient hill fort up there. Just how ancient, I don't know, because I couldn't find a date for that. And that big complex of buildings on the eastern side of it over there is the Royal Observatory. The date of the first parts of that were also a bit ambiguous, but I'm guessing it was a long time ago because, like that one we saw in Rome, we're too close to the city to be able to see much of anything with a telescope. So I'm guessing it was at least before 1881, which is when Edinburgh first got electric lights. So you can just kind of see the observatory part of it up there. Look at these rocks and everything. Looks great. And this thing over here is the largest of the Edinburgh University campuses, and they've got those things dotted all across the landscape out here too, but that appears to be the biggest section of them. Okay, so we're going to come right around this way, and this gigantic clump of buildings right here is the Royal Infirmary, a huge hospital, probably the biggest in town from what I could see, also affiliated with the university. And directly to the north of it right here, we'll get a much better look as we turn around, is another big fortification called Craig Miller Castle, and that one comes from the 1380s, and it has a legit curtain wall and everything, so it is a true blue castle. People tried maintaining it as a residence until they realized all the folks with better sensibilities were building more comfortable mansions, and the place fell into ruin during the 1800s, which is nice because what's left of it still looks like a legit castle. This wing's going to dip in a minute, we'll get a better view of it. One interesting footnote is that is the place where Mary, Queen of Scots, devised the plot to murder her husband, Lord Darnley, which was the catalyst of that battle we mentioned earlier. The Carberry Hill battle. Look at that hospital. That thing is huge. I bet there's a helipad down there somewhere. There's the castle. Check that out. Wonderful. This big mountain up here to our left is what's left of an extinct volcano, and they call it Arthur's Seat. Geologists believe the last time that mountain was active was at least 335 million years ago, and was probably significantly larger than what we see today because this area has been buried by glaciers dozens, if not hundreds of times since then. So there's been a lot of wearing down of the terrain. I've got all the graphics set pretty low, but this plane, because of all this glass, is a bit of a performance hog, so we're just going to get a little bit of stuttering, which you may have noticed there. More golf courses, look at that. And look at the terrain on the side of this hill. It looks beautiful. And they said there's all kinds of hiking stuff up there, so I don't know if the whole thing is called Arthur's Seat, or just the very top of it, because that's where the place marker was for it. right down here on this big, huge hill on the western side of it is Holyrood Palace, which is probably the most substantial of all the fancy houses out here, and for good reason. That is the official royal residence up here. And it has been serving that purpose for quite a while, going all the way back to the 1500s. And this is also the area where the botanical gardens used to be before it got flooded and killed everything. So I'm sure whoever was on the throne at the time was impressed by that ordeal, but look at that place. And that's the Scottish Parliament building right there, which is a neat looking place when you look right down on top of it, which we will do at the end. Alright, on top of this next little hill here, which is called Calton Hill, is the National Monument to Scotland, this thing right here. They started building that in 1826, and it was supposed to be dedicated to the soldiers of the Napoleonic Wars, but they ran out of money and never finished it, so you can see it's just half built. And this thing on the other side here is another little observatory, and this thing in the center of it here, they've turned into an art gallery. This big thing sticking up right here is a big monument to Sir Walter Scott, the novelist. They completed that in 1846, and you can actually take some stairs up to viewing platforms they built in the top of that thing. I think it's about 200 feet high. And there's Edinburgh Castle, which we could easily spend an hour talking about, but we won't. That sits on a hill called Castle Rock, and fortresses of various sorts have been going up there for a long time, at least the Iron Age. It was first used as a royal refuge by Malcolm III in the 11th century, and the monarchy continued using it up until 1633, after which it was mostly used as a military garrison. This huge thing here is yet another school. That one's called Donaldson's, and it's Scotland's National School for the Deaf. That was opened by Queen Victoria in 1850, and she reportedly claimed that the building was more impressive than most of her own palaces, and it certainly looks like it, doesn't it? But in 2008, they decided that facility was no longer up to snuff for its intended purpose, and now, just like the old asylum, it's been converted to luxury apartments, which I would absolutely love to live in a place like that. Okay, one last spot to see before we come in. Lauriston Castle will be up here on the southern end of this big field, so it's going to be right around here. And that was built in 1590 on the site of an older house that was destroyed during some raids on the city in 1544. And it was inhabited by the well-to-do of Edinburgh for centuries before being bequeathed to the city in 1926. And that one is haunted too, by the way. I think we could probably just safely assume that pretty much everything out here is haunted. This is going to be right down here. And it looks good too. Man, would I love to come out here. You guys know I love castles. Castles, forts, mansions, all of it. Love all of it. Volcanoes. The only thing we're missing is a huge impact crater. I'm not a big fan of just looking at bridges. I know some people are, but that doesn't really do it for me. You know, now that I'm thinking about it, okay, let me lose some speed here and take the autopilot off. I'm kind of wondering if people in Scotland are also offended by, even though they are officially part of the UK and have been for 300 years, being associated with the UK. Never been to Scotland, and I have no Scottish blood. Tons of Irish, Welsh, and English, though. In fact, my aunt put together a little Ancestry.com thing a couple years ago. She traced some of my lineage back to Wales, going back to the 1500s, which is pretty impressive. Good bit of research on her part. So I'm just hoping not accidentally offending somebody again. If I am, forgive me. I don't know any better. I don't know how ignorant I am. It's kind of like living in the South, even though the Civil War was 150, 200 years ago now. People around the South still like to call the Civil War the War of Northern Aggression. They all kind of say it tongue-in-cheek, though, and the ones who don't say it tongue-in-cheek are the ones I really don't feel like spending any time with. And we always talk smack about people from the North. People from the North talk smack about people from the South, but everybody usually just gets along. Which is hard to imagine this day and age because everybody's looking for a reason to hate everybody else, which is too bad. Alright, so after this flight, I really don't know where we're going to go. I've got a few different things in mind, but not absolutely positive what we're going to do. I saw the RV-8 just came out today, so I might check that out, and one of the guys in that group flight said I need to check out Captain Sims' C-130. And if you guys have been following all that drama, you know that he caught a lot of flack about making some subpar airplanes for a while. But I heard that one is particularly good, so I may go ahead and check it out. And I think it was on sale. I don't know if it still is, but he said it was like 20 bucks. Alright, one notch of flaps. And I'm going to see if we can make that first taxiway over there, because the next one is way, way, way down on the other side. Then once we get stopped, we'll check out little NavMap. Alright, second notch of flaps. We'll come in intentionally a little bit low here, and it looks like the pappies are working again, which is great. They weren't working properly on our last flight. And let's just hope my brakes work. We're about to find out. We can always pull the parachute if we need to. Let's see if I can hit it right at that threshold. That should give us enough room to stopping it over there, assuming the brakes are working. Yep, we're getting some of that stuttering now. Let's at least get over the threshold. Huh, the wind really died down since that last test flight. Only got 1 knot now. Alright, are the brakes working? Well, they don't really feel like it. Alright guys, hold on. This is going to be a tight turn if the brakes aren't working. We're going to do it anyway. Alright, let's get our flaps up. Yeah, I don't think they're working again, because we were going real fast for full brakes. Alright, well, let's just get pulled over somewhere on the side and look at little NavMap. Well, dang it, man, I really like this plane. It's just I've had all kinds of problems with it. And there was just an update I installed too, which apparently didn't fix the brakes, so maybe it's some kind of user error. That's always my default assumption. Alright, let's not get in the main traffic for the big planes coming in here. Let's just pull over this way. We'll pull over by this taxiway sign. And I can't stop. Okay, that's it. I can't get the parachute out either. That'll stop us. Whew. Well, I knew I'd finally find a reason to pull that thing out on a flight. Awesome. Absolutely awesome. Can I even get back in the plane? I don't know if I can. Alright, that's fine. Okay, here's a little NavMap. Well, that was awesome. Very cool. If you haven't done that yet in this plane, you should. And if your brakes don't work, you'll have a good reason to. Alright, so let's take off the centering. We got, look at all these bookmarks out here. By the way, this bookmark file will also be in the video description, so if you don't want to try to find where all these things are, you can load it right up in a little NavMap and at least be sure of the general area where you'll find them. So we left from way up here. Alright, so here's the big airport, grass, private airport. Look at all these golf courses everywhere. Look at this. They're all over the place. I almost choked them out in spit getting so excited about it. All right, so this is the Archerfield house. This was the older one that was not modeled up in the sim, so we didn't even bother looking for that. It was kind of buried in the trees, but this one was modeled by ORBX. This is Durlston Castle here, Durlton Castle, which was really dark in the sim and kind of hard to spot, but you'll see it because it's the first big thing around all these very default-looking sheds down here. Then we flew on out here by the castle, and this is the one that had the huge curtain walls, the huge gate, and there's the big keep there. 7 stories high that thing is. Fantastic. Man, even the satellite image is a bit blurry out here. And then here's Bass Rock. Oh yeah, you can see that thing is much, much closer in the water than it appeared in the sim. And we were flying over it. I did notice whatever this is here, so these might be some ruins of something else that was really old up here. Maybe that was part of the prison. I don't know how they would have gotten up there. And they've even got an old chapel out there. But now they got the lighthouse. Alright, so there's where I took my apology tour about the Ireland trip, and then here's where we got to Phaedra Island with their one lighthouse and their little castle, which it looks like they may have built those walls up a little bit higher in the sim than they are in real life, but at least there was something out there, which is cool. And then here's where those caves are, which again you can't see, but it was cool when he was coming into them from the ground. He took a picture from the outside. It's just like sand and like a bunch of brush growing over it, and you could just see the entrance to the cave. And then he took a picture from inside the cave looking out, and it looked like it had like a 15-foot ceiling. It was really, really cool. Would have been great for smuggling all kinds of things. And living in during the Iron Age, probably. So there's Guyane Bents, and then here's the sandbars. Look at this. So this was all just open water in the sim, but look at how much that... This must be low tide, because that is really sandy. Aberlady Bay. Awesome name. Okay, so here we came to Fawside. So this is where Mary Queen of Scots departed from before going off to that battle where all the aristocrats were doing a bunch of literally saber rattling. I was reading that they were challenging each other to one-on-one duels, but the guys wouldn't like fight each other because they thought that it was like below their status to fight a guy that was a lord and not a baron, or it was just ridiculous. You got to read the story of that. It was crazy. But she surrendered after all that. I guess it was super, super hot, and guys just started saying hell with this and just packing up and leaving. So she surrendered. And that was it. Then she abdicated. Okay, so there's New Wales House. We could see that. It looked pretty cool. Very cool. And then, okay, so we couldn't really see anything over here yet, but here is the Fourth Ports. And look, there's the sign we saw. Awesome. And where is it? Did they put the wee little house of the wee Museum of Memories? Oh, it's not even on here. It's on the Google map, though. But there's the yacht, the Britannia. That's where you go if there's going to be a nuclear attack. Just get out there really, really quick. All right, then we came down here this way. Okay, so here's the Botanical Gardens, and all you could see from where we were is this big, big greenhouse right here, and you could see this one right here, too. But as you can see, it's all really treed in, so we couldn't see anything else. But you could definitely see this thing, the Fettes College. That's the one that was... Let's see, I don't remember if that was the boys' school or the school for the deaf. But that looked amazing and looked a lot bigger in the sim than it does looking down on top of it. But you can tell by that shadow that it is huge. Okay, came out here to Carmen Island, and this is the one that you can see now. Look, okay, so it is low tide. You can walk right out there on that walkway, and they said there's all kinds of warning signs to make sure that you decide to come on back, because that's not a short distance. Let's see how long that is. So almost 4,000 feet. But they said make sure you know when the tide's coming back in, you'll get stuck. So this is where I landed the helicopter before, and there's graffiti spray painted all around the side of it that you can actually see. And even these rocks look that detailed when you come down on that thing, which was just so cool. And in the sim, you can also see all these pillboxes and batteries and everything from World War II. Just a neat little island over there. And then here is Dalmany Castle and the Barnbogle Castle. These names just awesome. Boy, that place is pretty close to the water. I'm surprised that's still standing, but it looks like they have built up a little bit of reinforcement so that doesn't get washed away. And then here's the Hounds Point Oil Terminal, and then here's Hounds Point, where if you see the dog and you live in that house, you're in trouble. Here's Inchgarvie, and look at all the stuff they still got on this thing. Look at that. Just all over it. All these islands look like that. How fun would it be to walk around on that thing? So this is the Forth Bridge. This is the older one, late 1800s, and this one's the railway bridge. And this is the one from the 60s, 1960s, the Forth Road Bridge, and then the Queens Ferry Crossing Bridge over here. There's that great-looking marina that we saw and that little breakwater that was out there, Port Edgar. And then we came out here to Dundas Castle. That looked amazing. That looked really, really good in the sim. And that's the one you can rent out for weddings or whatever else you want. Flew over the airport, and then here's the Camo Tower. And then here's where the house was. So it looks like they might still have like a foundation or something in that place. But you couldn't see that in the sim. Too many trees. But just imagine what the gardens must have looked like. Oh, look at that. A walled garden. So there must still be some ruins of the garden down there, too. And the piggery. Well, that'd be fun to explore that, huh? Look at that. I don't wonder why they built it so far away from the house. But they said it was part of the garden feature, so it must have been central to the gardens while they were out there. Okay, so here's the zoo over here, and then here's that C-shaped building, which will kind of point you directly towards where the zoos are. And you can see the little penguin area over here. If you get a little bit closer, you might be able to see more of that, but you know how zoos are. And then here's that huge stadium that we saw. And then here is... Oh, we saw that one coming back around. Okay, so that one, I think, was the one that was... No, that one was... Okay, so this is where Connery was building, or delivering the milk. We'll get back to that in just a minute. Okay, we flew over this. We couldn't really see it because we were right over it, but this is another big... And it looks like that was built on an old house, too, unless they just built it to look like that. Judging by that roof, I would say they just built it to look like an old house, but that's also part of Edinburgh University. But when you see that, if you're a little bit further out, you would think it was a big old house. But here's the one that was the asylum. Look at that place. That also looked amazing. And it's probably haunted. And they were nice enough to just leave a tiny little bit of the gardens for us. Okay, then we came over to Blackford Hill, and this is where the old prehistoric ruins were of the Iron Age hill fort. I don't know how much of it's left. I can't really see anything that looks like a hill fort up there, or even the remains of one. And here's the Royal Observatory. And they say they do a lot of timepiece technology stuff there, like timekeeping technology these days. So they're still using it, probably not as an observatory, except for like little field trips for middle schoolers and stuff like that, probably. So that's where that was. There's the big campus for Edinburgh University. And then we came out here to see the big, huge hospital. All right, where's the helipad? There it is. I knew they had one out here somewhere. I don't think you could land on that in the sim, though. At least you couldn't select it. I mean, you could land wherever you want, but that is a gigantic hospital. Really big. And then here's Craigmillar Castle. That's the place where Mary, Queen of Scots, was scheming to kill her husband, which she did do, and is what triggered that little standoff they had. Look at that place. Incredible. All right, then we came up here to Arthur's Seat, which looked great, especially this part right over here. That was beautiful. And then here's the current Royal Palace, the Palace of Holyrood House, or Holyrood Palace, they also call it. And this is where the old botanical garden was over here. And it got flooded and nasty and polluted. And look at the top of this building. So this is the Parliament building now. And you really couldn't tell from the sim because we were kind of too far over. We're seeing it more from the side. But look at the top of that. Really cool. And I think this is a museum over here, Dynamic Earth. So then we flew around Calton Hill. And here's where the half-finished National Monument of Scotland is. That'd be kind of neat just to check it out. And that thing looks really big from the ground. You can see the people staying next to it. I wonder what it was originally intended to look like. And then there's where the observatory was, the other one. And then there's where the art museum is now. There's the big train station here in town, and here is the Scott Monument, which you really can't tell except for that giant shadow how huge it is, but you could definitely tell it's big in the sim because it's sticking way up there. So that's just Sir Walter Scott. And here's Edinburgh Castle. I would love to check that out. And what made it particularly defensible was, as you could see while we were flying by, it's built on top of yet another volcanic plug. And so they had not only the castle walls going around it, but all of these sheer cliffs surrounding it because it was sitting on top of that big pile of volcanic rock, which is awesome. All right, so this is the one, Donaldson's College, where this was a boys' school. that they have now converted into a residential place, and all of these are new residential places they built, but I'm guessing you could probably also live down here if you wanted to. And that's where Connery was the Edinburgh milkman. And you can see this in the sim too. You can really spot it because of this little lake they got out here. This is the Scottish National Gallery of Modern Art. The building itself isn't that impressive, but it's kind of neat to look at that little pond they got there. And then we came on by, which one is this? Lauriston Castle, which looked fantastic. And then came on in. Whew, man, what a trip that was. Amazing trip. I'm so glad we came out here. I just wish they could tighten up the photogrammetry for the European cities. It was good. Not phenomenal, but it was fun. We got to see amazing things, talk about amazing things, learn amazing things. Just absolutely wonderful. Had an absolute blast as always, and I cannot wait to see y'all again in the skies later.